Please welcome, with ideas about innovation, entrepreneurship, and her passion for learning, Rapelang Rabana.
Good morning, everyone. I guess everyone's loving their tea and still drinking. Thank you so much for coming today, and I'm really, really honored to be speaking with you today, mostly because I think my journey from graduating from UCT to being acknowledged by people like the World Economic Forum and Forbes has been quite unconventional. And while I'm a guest speaker and a keynote speaker, I'm supposed to chat to you about my journey. I also want to talk to you about something I'm very passionate about, learning and skills development, particularly on the African continent, because I want you to be able to walk away with something that you can think about and apply in your own organizations. So taking a step back and looking at my own journey, after university in 2005, I co-founded my first business with my classmates. Frustrated by the high telecommunications costs, we thought we could create a world where voice telephony and messaging on mobile phones was cheaper on the internet. As students, things were always really, really expensive. We still use please call me's a lot. We would send like one please call me to say meet me at 5 o'clock, and two please call me's meant meet me at 6 o'clock instead. And we thought that the world could be a lot more different than that. And so we developed some of the earliest voice over IP applications on mobile phones back in the time before Android and iPhone. If you can remember a time when mobile phones, the smartest ones were Windows Mobile and Symbian Nokia phones, it was way back then. To me, that's the transformative and leveling and inclusive power of the internet, that a group of young UCT students sitting in a little apartment in Cape Town were able to develop world-class software just by having access to the internet. We literally Googled our way to success, and Jaeger was acquired by Telfree in 2009. That was a transformative experience for me that has forever shaped my world and made me even more dedicated to how we use mobile and internet technology to solve major socio-economic challenges at scale. My most recent venture is Rekindle Learning, where I'm really looking at how we improve the learning efficiencies and how we build capabilities better for the future in corporate environments as well as academic environments. We're working with companies in Botswana, South Africa, and Kenya. You're going to hear a lot in your sessions with the symposium, I suppose, about how technology in the digital wave is affecting so many industries and so many areas of our lives. I feel that we haven't seen enough progress on the learning and development side, and that's what I want to focus on today. We all know about the challenges and the skills deficit on the African continent. Learning in schools in particular is very challenging. Learners, as of 2012, only 35% were literate. The World Economic Forum has indicated that skills and development are some of the key challenges facing Africa today, as said by business and civic leaders across the continent. The reason I became an entrepreneur and how I decide what kind of businesses I build is always deeply related to the kinds of things that I experienced as a child or growing up, and whatever life experiences and perspectives I developed there. So even in my interest here and with Rekindle Learning, it relates to that and my own schooling days. While I had a great educational experience by any measure, I still noticed deficiencies back then. I'm sure not everyone here can easily remember those school days, but for those of you who can't, I hope you can think about this through your children. So while I had a really great education, I started to spot some inefficiencies. So we'd get to school and we'd do these tests, and the teacher would give you back this test script, and you look at the answers that you got wrong, and you kind of promise yourself, I'll come back to them later on. And some of the things you were lucky to get right, and you knew they were flukes, and you told yourself, I'll come back to that too. But in the reality, it never, ever happened. It was too much to keep up with, so year to year, you go from one year to the next, reinforcing the things you were good at and leaving the things behind that you weren't good at. When I started tutoring in Guletu, one of the townships outside Cape Town, I started to see that these inefficiencies were exacerbated in resource-constrained schools. What happened there is that these learners got to school fine, they were taught reasonably well, but when they did a test, they would often only get a test mark back. So they wouldn't know for sure what they got wrong or even what they got right. So for me, it's a clear indication that there is no closed feedback loop, and that completely undermines that learning process. While there are certainly many, many factors in our schools that affect learning, we seem to let the most obvious problems persist. This contributes to a huge and growing population of young people that have lots of potential, but aren't ready for work because they aren't equipped with the knowledge and skills to be able to do so. And this is making our pool of young people shallower and shallower. At this point, you can say, it's really messed things up for us. But the reality is that problems and how we train and build people persist into business as well. Some of the statistics say that $60 billion in the United States is spent on training and development, yet only 30% of that knowledge is retained. That's a $42 billion wastage. Other statistics, 12 months after training, most employees are only applying 7% of what they learned. That's some pretty shocking statistics. And why is the solution so ineffective? The reasons aren't actually news. We've all known about them before, yet we persist on training and learning the same way we've always done. We go with these long training workshops, these 5, 10-day, 25-day training workshops, and create cognitive overload for staff by trying to get them to remember all of these things that they have no chance of remembering. This leads us to a little problem called the forgetting curve, and how most of us forget most new information. Without ongoing reinforcement and consolidation, we forget 70% of what we were taught in a classroom environment. Outside of the actual methodologies, the world we live in has also changed. The average job retention is now only 2 years. So all these inefficient methods that we use to train will probably only get someone to competency in those 2 years, and then they leave. I love how companies fashionably refer to people as their greatest asset. But when we compare it to other assets in our companies, our properties, our fleets, and hardware systems, can we really say that we haven't underutilized our people assets? The nail in the coffin, though, is that we like to believe that everything HR and people-related is HR's problem. Certainly not the CIO's problem, not my division's problem, and it's HR's problem, and we relegate it to that and deprioritize it in an organization environment. But the bottom line is, if there's people in the sales team that are ineffective, it's a sales problem. If the technology in your organization is not capacitating people to be able to be at their most productive, it's a business problem. The sooner we get people to competency, the better it is to all of us. Let's look at this productivity curve. If I was to come and work in your company today, how long do you think it will take me to get to that point where I cross that x-axis of zero value and start adding more value than I cost you? It'll differ depending on each industry and job role. But the point is that if we were using more effective learning methods, we could dramatically cut that time and avoid all of that lost value. Quantifying that lost value is something we try to avoid doing. But let's say I was a customer service agent and I earned 11,000 rands a month. Over a year, if it takes me that long to get competent, that's over 130,000 rands lost. And if I was higher up the salary scale, it gets worse and worse. Yet we keep overlooking these problems. The faster we capacitate people, the more they can add value. It makes business sense. And there are better ways to do things. My decision to become an entrepreneur had very little to do with liking business or finance or numbers or anything like that. It was a mindset shift that is really accessible to anyone, whether you're in a big company or starting your own venture. It dawned upon me sometime before the end of university that life as we know it isn't quite as it seems.